Very quick video on periodic functions. Periodic functions are functions that repeat themselves. So a graph of periodic function repeats itself in a regular way. The following graphs represent a periodic function. So let's go over a couple. There's our sine curve, up and down, up and down, up and down. It'll look a little nicer when we get into it. And then we also have just, here's like a heartbeat or something like that. So you see the same pattern. It repeats itself, it repeats itself. This is called a cycle. So what happens is something repeats itself from start to finish. When it's done, we're done one cycle. Okay, so there's one cycle, two cycles, etc. One example that we use in class is the temperature in London, Ontario between January and December. And what happens is our low point might be -4 degrees. Our average temperature in January might be -4. And then it warms up through the summer months and cools down again in December. Then we might have a high in July of, let's say, 26 degrees. Okay, so that's our scenario here. There's your cycle. The period, so one word that we use in this section of the course is period. That's the length of time for one cycle. So the next year I would repeat it, and the next year I would repeat it. But this cycle is done in 12 months or a year or 365 days, depending on how you want to define time. But that's the period. Okay, the next thing we might want to look at is something called the amplitude. So the amplitude, and we also have something called the rest position. So let's start with rest position because it'll help us get the amplitude after. So here's our max value and our min value. If you take the max and the min and you add them together and divide by 2, you'll get the rest position or the middle. So this is easy when we're not dealing with negative numbers, but when you have negative numbers, it sometimes gets a little tricky. So what's the middle of 26 and -4? So you take 26 and you add to it -4, which is 22, divide by 2, and your middle value is 11. So there's your middle value, or your rest position, or the axis of the curve. Okay, so that's the center right here. It doesn't have to be, so if I have a curve that looks something like this, okay, I'm just going to make it really obnoxiously like that. The middle, or the rest, is in the middle here. So if this was 10 and this was 0, the middle would be 5, which would be here. Okay. Now, just because we spend most of our time underneath the curve doesn't mean anything here. Okay. It's just the middle of the curve is called the rest position or the axis of the curve. The last thing you want to talk about is the amplitude. And the amplitude is this distance here from the axis of the curve or the rest position to the maximum. It's also the distance between the rest position and the minimum. So this is just you take your top and then you take your bottom, and in this case you subtract them and divide by 2, or you take your rest and subtract from it the max. Either way, in this case, you're going to get 15. Okay, that's 30 divided by 2 is 15. So your amplitude is 15. Okay, so if it repeats itself as periodic, if it's not periodic. What could it be? It could be quadratic. It could be a bunch of other things. Okay, and that's about it. Okay, that's the intro to this part of the course, and we'll move on to sine curves in the next video.